We're here again with Mark Collinsworth of the Vere Global Financial Systems. And Mark, good news today, I guess. The stock market on this Friday closed, what, 829 points. Now, was that largely due to the jobs report that came out in Trump's speech today that happy days are almost here again?
Correct. The bulk of today's rally was based on the very, very big surprise in the unemployment numbers. There was actually over 2 million jobs created where most people were expecting 7 million jobs to be lost. That was part of it. And of course, yesterday, the ECB, which is the equivalent to our Federal Reserve, they're doing a whole brand new round of massive stimulus into their economy to jumpstart it.
Well, are happy days almost here again, as Trump says, or do you see that the economic picture for the months ahead is not quite so rosy as our president is projecting?
Well, here's the problems I see. One, last week the Fed's Beige Book came out. That's the economic report that the Federal Reserve uses to gauge the situation of the economy. And I went through that and I read that. So it's almost a 60-page report. It highlighted 18 times in the report that there was a problem with jobs because people that are on unemployment don't want to go back to work. They're making too much money between the extra $600 the government's giving them and then the unemployment insurance. So they're not wanting to go back to work. That's problem number one. Problem number two is the government has issued all these forgivable loans that if you don't fire people for the next 3 months, you're going to basically, you get to keep that money. Not to mention any names, but I've talked to several people who have taken those loans, and some of these people have gotten, several $1 million. And according to the stipulation, if you 80% of that money can go to keep people working, so you don't have to fire them. The people I've talked to, as soon as that 3 months is up, they're going to start firing people, and they get to keep 20% of that. So I have some people that are going to make $200,000 and $300,000 bonus checks just simply for letting the government pay the salaries for the next 3 months, and they get a bonus check with no money out of their pocket. It's all free money to them.
And this will not translate into a stronger economy.
No, because right now people are so concerned. The people I've talked to, on the street, their concern is for business owners come the fall, and there's a pretty good chance we'll have another round of the coronavirus. What happens to their businesses then? Do we have to shut down again? And these people are wondering, will the government come out and issue me another stimulus check? So why not go ahead and play it safe, get my loan today? I get to keep 20% of it. I can start laying people off and start preparing for the fall if there's another coronavirus, and that's how they're looking at surviving the rest of this year.
So what is Trump talking about? Is it all hot air that the economy is going to come back sooner than expected and strong?
Well, this is what I've discovered from politics, and this is especially so in economics, especially so in election years. You always have to do a good sales job. You can never talk about negatives. You always have to talk about the positives. Oh. If right now in the background the White House was burning to the ground and the Russians were waving a flag and trampling and jumping up and down on the American flag saying, "We took America," the current president in election year is saying, "We're here. We've got it under control. No worries. Don't panic."
Or actually any president, right, in a situation like that would be trying to rally the troops. So again, then, this is largely an illusion.
Correct. A lot of it is. Even today, the Department of Labor, after they did the initial report, they actually came out and actually said that they made a mistake, that the numbers are probably not as good as what they appear to be because of the way they're calculating people who are currently employed. Like right now, the Department of Labor knows that some people are going to be fired that are currently getting, like I said, that they get the loan. As long as those people are sitting at home not working, but they're still getting paid by the government, they're being classified as employed, but those people aren't going to get a chance to go back to work. Not to mention, we've already had Hertz and J.C. Penney's, two companies that have been around for decades, filed bankruptcy just here in the last 30 days. Those people are not going to have a job to go back to. They've got to find new jobs and new industries to go to work in.
Well, the initial report today that everybody was was promoting, especially the Trump administration, was 2.5 million jobs were added rather than the millions of jobs lost, which had been predicted. So instead of a job loss, 2.5 were added, and that brought the unemployment rate down to 13.3%. So you're saying they're already revising those figures?
And this is another thing they do. They also go through what they call a seasonal averaging, where they look at there's going to be a normal, at this time of the year, there's a normal hiring and firing because, high school students are are getting out of high school. They're going into the labor market, so they make adjustments for that. I'm very curious to know, based on those seasonal adjustments they historically make for this time of the year, how much those actually overstated the number of people that actually got hired. Because what's interesting here, Larry, is this report says that there's jobs created, but just here in the last 4 weeks, we've seen almost 5 million new people file for unemployment claims. 5 million more people have filed for unemployment. Now, why do you have a $2 million job creation, but 5 million people have gone to their state governments and said, "Hey, I've lost my job. I need to start getting a check"? I don't understand the difference.
Where did those jobs come from, the jobs that have come back? Actually, they were existing jobs, people who were furloughed and now are back at work. Was that it?
I think that's what's actually happened. If I had to guess, the Labor Department hasn't come out and actually said what the mistake was on how they're calculating unemployment, the employed people. I think what they're doing is they're basically saying the people that were furloughed, those people were classified as unemployed last month, even though they have a job to go back to, and they were still getting a paycheck from their companies. This here in the last week, those people that were on furlough went back to work, and now the Department of Labor is classifying them as employed. But they were never unemployed to begin with because they were still getting paid a salary from their office based on the PPP loans, if that kind of makes sense.
But in fact, since they are going back to work, there are still jobs to go back to. So is that not a positive sign?
That is a positive sign. There are jobs out there for you to go to, but the scale of the jobs are also going to be a little more challenging because, let's say you have 100,000 people that lost their jobs from, being a waiter or a waitress. Right. And those jobs are currently open. Well, 100,000 people lost their jobs at JCPenney's. That 100,000 people from JCPenney's could very easily take those jobs for the waiter and waitress positions, and now you still have 100,000 people that don't have a job because another industry, like retail, came over to their jobs.
Yeah, in fact, they were reporting that there were 1.4 million in the services and drinking places, restaurants and bars. That rose by 1.4 million, and 464,000 in construction and I guess manufacturing. So does that sound too good to be true?
No, if I had to guess, you're probably going to see a rebound in manufacturing sooner because, like construction, to build new homes and things, you're kind of on a very limited time frame on when you can actually start building homes. Yeah. You only really build homes during the warm weather. So the construction companies are going to hit it fast and furious to get people out starting to build homes as quickly as possible. So that makes sense that you'd see that in that sector.
Well, would that be homes or commercial structures? Because who has the money now to build a home in the middle of all this?
Well, a lot of those contracts were actually backloaded. So people that wanted to build homes from, let's say, January and February, those contracts are still active. Now, the big question is, will the contract might still be in force, but will, at the end of the day, when it comes time to start writing the checks out, will there be money there for those checks to be written to those people?
The fact that the contracts are out there, they're counting that as new construction starts or something similar.
Those people are being hired to fill those contract obligations, but how much money is there to actually pay those people when payday actually rolls around?
Well, because the stock market soared today and because of the jobs report, Trump was saying in his speech today that the stock market is going to do very well. And in fact, he even cited Warren Buffett. He said, some people like Warren Buffett, who's usually right, but this time he wasn't, he shouldn't have sold his airline stocks because airline stocks are way up. So the president says Warren Buffett was off. Do you think Warren Buffett didn't know what he was doing, as Trump suggests?
I don't think so. People like Warren Buffett and people like, Stanley Druckenmiller, David Tepper, Jeremy Gratham, some of the world's greatest investors, they have a very specific strategy that they use when they pick stocks or invest. And right now, that strategy is telling them not to be invested in the stock market. And the reason why is, one, the unknowns. You don't know how many other companies are going to be out there that's going to go bankrupt. You don't know if there's going to be a second round of the coronavirus and everything's going to have to shut down again. You don't know what's going to happen when the Federal Reserve, who is spending $300 billion a week to buy bonds, what happens when they stop? Because 5 years ago, when they was doing $50 billion a month, they thought that was too much, and now they're doing $300 billion. What happens when that stops? Stock valuations are in the top 10% of the highest valuations we've ever had, and more importantly, the companies, when they have the conference calls, companies won't even tell you now they have withdrawn all their outlooks for the next quarter because those companies don't know what's going to happen to the economy in the next 3 months. And more importantly is right now, the people that actually work at those companies, CEOs and CFOs, who are the people that know the most about their sector and the most about what's going on in their business, right now are selling record levels of stocks. Why are they selling their stocks if the economy is going to start doing so much better?
Because they don't know better, or they do know better?
They probably do know better. And this is the thing. If you look at the trading right now going on, the institutional investor, the professional investor that manages hundreds of billions of dollars, they're walking away from the stock market right now.
Yeah.
They're in cash. And that simply goes, and the people that are dominating this market right now are retail investors. A lot of people who are laid off their jobs, whatever, are day trading. I was actually watching a video earlier about this guy that's laid off, saying he's not ever going to go back to work because he's made so much money day trading stocks.
Well, if he did, that's an indication that maybe happy days are here again shortly.
But here's the thing. We know bear market sell-offs happen. You know, just here in the last few weeks, over 800,000 new brokerage accounts have been opened at retail brokerage firms for looks like the amateur to invest with.
Yeah.
What happens? These people have never seen a bear market. What happens when we get another 20 or 30% sell-off and these people have invested their mortgage payments and their utility bills in the stock market thinking that's easy to make money, and they lose all of it? What happens then?
Yeah, actually, you're saying generally there's a disconnect between the soaring of the stock market and reality. It's really
Correct.
an illusion.
Correct. Fantasy and reality have totally departed from themselves here. You've got economic numbers that match, and in some cases have actually exceeded those of the Great Depression. But yet the stock market has gone up well over 30% in just a matter of weeks. I mean, American Airlines stock, just this week alone, American Airlines stock is up almost 70%. Why is it up 70% in a week? Hertz filed bankruptcy 2 weeks ago, and its stock was up 100% today, and the company's officially bankrupt.
Well, that's a good question. Why?
Because the retail investor is buying into these stocks thinking they're going to make a ton of money. And retail investors have done very well here. But the problem is the Federal Reserve has done everything it can to push the stock market up. And the retail investor has benefited from it. But your professional investor that does this for a living, he knows there's tons of problems out there. And it's just going to take, out of a dozen serious problems, it's only going to take one to light the fire. All this comes burning down in a matter of minutes.
Well, why would the retail investor, the amateurs, decide that Hertz is a good stock to invest in, even though it's in bankruptcy? I mean, what's the logic behind that?
The logic is that the stock was just 2 weeks ago was trading for like 80 cents a share. It's now trading for $3 a share. The logic is, well, hey, I can go out and I can buy 1,000 shares of this stock at 88 cents a share. Not a big sum of money. And then when Hertz gets back to its all-time record high, it'll be back to $100 a share, and I can retire. I can pay my house off. It's basically coming down to greed. Even today, with the stock market being up 30%, the number one question that I get asked is, what's the best leveraged ETF to get into? An ETF that the stock market goes up 3%, your ETF goes up 10%. And so the amount of greed coming into this market right now is just totally off the hook. I mean, retail investors are just salivating, think there's no such thing as a down day in the stock market. And may God have mercy on them when you see your normal 10 or 15% sell-off and they hit the panic button.
Well, why are they wrong to think that Hertz will rebound, that they'll go way back up, since it was a big, well-known, solid company?
Well, part of it is because they've been trained to, of course, buy the dip. They've looked over the last 10 years wherever the stock market sold off. They've been trained to buy into it. That's one problem. The second problem with Hertz is because they don't sit there and know how to look at a company, they don't know the underlying problems. I'll give you a perfect example. Hertz has filed bankruptcy. Did you know you can go to Hertz website right now and buy yourself a used car for about 20 to 50% below what you could actually buy if you go to a normal car lot?
I didn't know that.
There's going to be no assets left in Hertz. Why would you want to buy a company? You're buying into a car company that doesn't have any cars to rent out. Think about that.
All right, now why the rise in airline stock? Are people that depends on travel and leisure? Are people starting to travel again? Are they engaged in more leisure activity again? Is that a real rise? Is there something solid behind that rise in airline stocks, or is that an illusion?
It's a little bit of both. And let me explain. All right, so there's going to be more travel. People are going to start flying more. So there's a reason that you're going to see travel on airplanes. Okay, reason there. But this is the thing. With social distancing, the airlines are only going to let you seat one every 3 seats. So out of a plane of 100 seats, you can only sit 30 people to keep it social distancing. Now, I don't know about the rest of these retail investors, but a company's profits are the main driver of a stock price. How is Delta Airlines going to make the same profits it did 12 months ago with only selling 30% of the chairs on the plane?
So in other words, these retailers, investors, these amateurs, they see something of an increase in travel and leisure. So therefore, they're flocking to the airline stocks thinking it's going to go wide open again. And that's the mistake they're making. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. They're making the assumption that everything's going to be back to 100% normal. So if Delta Airlines was making, let's say, $1 billion a year 12 months ago, they assume that it's going to make $1 billion again this year. No, it's not going to make $1 billion again this year when it's only filling up 30% of the airplane.
All right. So Mark, considering all of what we've been discussing, how do you see it in the next months, even the next 6 months, a year ahead? I mean, are we still going to be wading through a serious recession, maybe even depression, or are we going to be easing out of it, at least to some level, even if not what Trump is predicting, but we will be easing towards a substantial recovery or not?
I think we'll be moving towards a recovery, but I think the recovery is going to be very slow because no business owner wants to bet the farm on all these unknowns that we've already covered. And one of the big things in economic and investment theory for years has been debated is, does fundamentals drive the stock market, or is it the Federal Reserve pumping liquidity into the stock market drive it? And that's been a big debate. Well, that question has been answered here in the last few weeks. It's the Federal Reserve, because if you really looked at the underlying fundamentals of what's going on, companies have been around for decades that have seen numerous recessions. JCPenney's gone through depressions, are going bankrupt. You've gone, in the Great Depression, it took 4 years for 30 million people to lose their jobs. We've lost 30 million jobs in 6 weeks. And you're telling me that everything's going to be fine and dandy, like boom, like that? No, it's not. It's going to take time.
So you're saying that the infusion of money from the Fed is what's propping up the market, and there's no real recovery behind it?
That is correct.
All right, last question. You're a stock advisor. You do manage accounts for people, and your record is very good. I know that. Personally, I know that. So what's your advice to people now who have investments in the stock market or whatever other vehicles? What do they do, and where do they keep their money? How do they shift it around? What should they do?
Well, this is kind of my take on it. Of course, I talk very bearish, but yet, my investors that I invested with me, they see me buying stocks. And of course, one of the questions I always ask is, why are you buying stocks if you're just bearish? And my reply is, well, I like to ride a horse all the way up until when it stops. So I'll keep riding the stock market, and I'll keep making money off these retail investors pushing up stocks, not knowing what they're doing. And hopefully we're going to really test out my skill set. It's like playing chicken with the locomotive. I've got the skill set that when I know things are starting to really break down fast and furious, I'll step back fast and furious. Some of these retail investors are going to learn the hard way when school's in session. Like I tell people, the stock market's one hell of a teacher. It gives you the test first and then teaches you the lesson afterwards.
So what you're saying is, to put it bluntly, is that you are trading positively on the ignorance of the retailers, of the amateurs that are driving it up artificially, but until it gets to the point where it's going to drop, might as well make money off of that. That's what you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Ride the horse until it stops. The retail investor, they won't know when there's problems. It's just like back in 2006, I was telling people about the housing bubble, and people were calling me nuts. People were telling me, you have to buy a house. When you're born short a house. And I'm like, no, there's like nothing. There's like $5 trillion of air in there. No one really believed it. Well, look what happened. The professionals walked away from this thing in 2007 smelling like a rose. People laughed at them for 2 years. The dot-com bubble, they laughed at the professionals for 2 years, and they walked away making millions. It's the same story over and over again. When the retail investor sits back and laughs and says, I'm smarter than the guy that's the self-made millionaire and billionaire from investing in stocks, I'm smarter than they are, they don't know what they're doing, they just got lucky. No, we understand how things operate, and we're playing the markets based on your ignorance.
And you were saying that among the younger crowd now, they've got all these apps now that are that they're on constantly, driving whatever, and day trading through that, and a lot of that is pumping up things artificially.
Yeah, and the reason why I know there's a bubble, my 12-year-old son is coming into my office giving me stock tips.
From one of those apps that they're on?
From one of those apps he plays on. Does that not tell you there's a problem?
Well, we'll see if Dad is right as we go along.
We'll see.
If your son is right, then he's going to be the genius that we can elevate to a major status in stock advice. But we'll see about that. That's a funny domestic situation. All right, Mark Collinsworth of Vere Global. Thanks again for being with us.
Thank you.